Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Balaji Iyer. I'm the Business Development Manager for Public Sector at AWS for AI and Machine Learning. Welcome to our session, Government 3.0, Modernizing Your Agency and Upskilling with Machine Learning. A couple of logistic items before we get started. The doors that you came in, that's also the emergency exit. Please turn off your cell phones. And please download the app for the summit, and please provide feedback. We pay a lot of attention to the feedback. And if you want a different session next time, let us know. If you want a different set of panelists, do let us know as well.
Thanks, man.
And if you're an AWS employee, make sure you give the seats for customers or partners, and if there's enough room, we will record the session. You should be able to see that offline, just FYI. We have an amazing panel for you today. We have leaders from across the federal government space who are applying artificial intelligence and machine learning to serve citizens, save time and money, and support the mission. They are here to share their experiences and expertise on where they are in that journey and where they're headed. We want everyone to leave this session with some practical advice on how they can begin to apply technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning to move from research to practice. Now I would like to introduce our panelists. First off, we have Dave Levy. He's the Vice President for US Government at AWS. Dave will be our moderator today. And next is Robert Brown. Robert is the CTO of US Citizenship and Immigration Services. Next is Chris Delp. Chris is the Director at Computer Aided Design at NASA JPL. And we have Ira Barron. Ira is the CTO of the Office of Justice Programs at the US Department of Justice. And next is Ralph Berko. Ralph is the lead architect for software engineering at National Security Directorate in Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, PNNL. And last up, we have Zachary Hall. Zach is a computer scientist at US SOCOM Special Operations Command. Thank you, everyone.
I don't have to go first.
You don't want different panelists next year. You want us. Thanks.
Absolutely did.
Thanks, Balaji. Really appreciate it. And thank you for coming in today. And I know we've had people travel from a lot of different places. So we've got an awesome group, and I really appreciate their participation. AWS, we pride ourselves on moving really, really fast. In 2017, we launched 1,430 unique services and features. In 2018, we launched 1,957-ish features, and we expect that pace of innovation to continue. And so we think of ourselves as leaders and innovators in the space, but a lot of that is a result of what our customers do. And our customers are really the ones driving the mission. And we're all stakeholders in the success of government's adoption of machine learning and AI. And so like many of you, I'm excited to see how we can harness the power of data to transform government. We'll talk about a lot of exciting use cases today and the application of machine learning and AI. And I think everything is finally coming together at once. The power of cloud computing, improved tools and algorithms for machine learning. Developers are now able to get access to machine learning tools in a way that they never have before. And this is unlocking a flurry of innovation and experimentation. And so machine learning and AI are no longer the exclusive domain of big tech companies and computer science departments. It's now way simpler and less expensive to apply them. And in effect, we're democratizing machine learning and AI for everyone to use. And really, in the future, we believe the vast majority of applications will be infused with machine learning and AI. Our focus at AWS, as I mentioned, is pouring gasoline on this fire, hopefully, and working with our customers and partners to make AI and ML even easier to use, even faster, and even cheaper. And we want every developer, every data scientist, and every researcher to be able to use it. So thank you. We'll get started with the panel. And once again, thank you, everybody, for coming. So we did introductions. I'm going to start at the end. Zachary, with you. Good, right?
All right, great. Thanks.
Let me start with, can you describe a machine learning or AI initiative that you're working on, and what problem are you trying to solve?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started probably about 5 years ago using AWS operationally. And about a year ago, we really started exploring the use of some of the AI services. We really focused initially on the processing of media seized off of the battlefield, using translate, comprehend, recognition, et cetera, to really extract some value out of the media at a scale that we'd never been able to do previously with humans looking at that data. And it was largely a triage and processing effort. More recently, we've been using or exploring the use of SageMaker and the Snowball devices to see if we can push those analytics out to the edge and speed up at the point of collection, and I guess I would say use it to potentially triage and prioritize which data we send back over low bandwidth networks.
Yeah, you and I were talking in the back about missions, about like real missions, scary missions for civilians. But how have you seen that impact missions?
Yeah, like I said, it's really allowed the analysts to focus on the things that are sort of cognitively challenging, right? The things that they should be doing, as opposed to sifting and sorting through, sort of differentiating the useful media from the objectionable content and other things. And it's really led to faster decisions and faster decision cycles, right? And leading to new missions and new operations.
That's great. Ralph, what about you? What about at PNNL? What sorts of things are you taking on with AI and ML?
Sure. So PNNL as a whole, we're an applied research institution, and we do a wide variety of things, everything from basic sciences and chemistry and physics and biology we do a lot with energy, renewable energies and whatnot, and then cyber and then national security as well. My focus in particular is in the national security area and doing work with helping our sponsors accomplish their mission, much like Zach mentioned. And so what he had mentioned about the triaging of the data, that fits in well with some of the work that I've been part of myself, where there's a lot of data, and that's what is in common across the entire lab, regardless of what field you're in. There's more and more and more data, and you need to figure out how to process that data, and then you need to figure out how to triage that data. And then, for example, one of the projects I'm part of is a real-time image classification pipeline. So this goes beyond just a single call to recognition to tell me if this is a car or a bird or whatever, but also integrating our own models that we've created internally for narrowly focused purposes to accomplish that mission. So that's one example.
Yeah, that's great. Ira, I don't know how much physics and chemistry you're doing at OJP. Maybe,
not a lot.
Maybe you're doing a lot, but what sorts of things are you doing in the Department of Justice?
Sure. So Office of Justice Programs, where I work, is really in the business of funding awards, grants, to address challenges in American society. We see a couple of use cases, and frankly, we're not mature yet in them, but we're mature in our thinking about how to get there. I'll be glad to speak about that as we get to future questions. The two areas that we're really looking at are operationally looking to streamline how we deliver our services, finding ways of introducing management by exception using AI and ML to let human beings know when we have to intervene, and otherwise just let the machinery run itself. Strategically, we're looking at both ends of the spectrum. One is helping us to think about our portfolio or manage our portfolio of the awards we make by inferring where we think problems will be to get ahead of them. And we think that AI and ML can play a significant role in that. And one of the challenges we have is that it's sometimes difficult to understand or detect the actual impacts of the awards that we make. And we're looking at using AI ML to bring in other sorts of streams of information to correlate and then infer or bring attention to the impact of the awards we make, and then create a virtuous cycle to bring that back into portfolio management at the top. But as I say, this is still quite theoretical for us.
Great, great. Chris, Ira talked a little bit about making the inference or making the decision and what AI potentially, one of the use cases of decision making. What about at NASA JPL? Decisions there are pretty important.
So at JPL, of course, we have a lot of different research that takes place using AI, machine learning, lots of different stuff. My team in particular is in the engineering tools environment, and we have an initiative called model-based engineering environments, which is looking at how do we take and evolve the engineering designs that we make into more formally model-based products. And we think AI and ML may play a key role in this, as more of these engineering tools have more structured information that we need to reconcile with unstructured information that still exists in conventional products to increase the integrity. So effectively, the model-based engineering environment is a way of recording a lot of these engineering decisions. And as you can imagine, a modern spacecraft or rover is quite complex, and making sure that all the different disciplines are getting integrated together properly in a checkable way is key to understand. So we have an open source project that's part of this that manually built some of these capabilities where engineers can manually go and check all this stuff, and it's proven to be quite tedious. So our early research into this points in this direction that we'll be able to solve some of these problems with this. And actually, some of the demos I've even seen here this week indicate that it'll be quite tractable. So,
yeah, great. Rob, in your role as CTO at Immigration, what have you seen?
So from a mission perspective, we've had a lot of movement towards essentially looking at being more sort of person-centric and having person-centric systems that can be consumed by a lot of other services or domains within USCIS. About a year and a bit, the former director sort of put a mandate down of running the gauntlet of digitizing all of immigration, essentially from the various intake mechanisms that we have to all of the adjudication processes. So being a very Truman-era processed organization, as well as the majority of the benefits or products that USCIS delivers has been in it's all paper. So we've been actively moving towards digitizing all of immigration. So this has provided us a wealth of opportunities at USCIS to really take advantage of AI and ML. We have done, as it relates to person centricity, done a lot of text analytics and cleaning up a lot of our sort of dirty databases, and specifically around doing essentially indexing people to make sure that they are the people who they say they are. Some more recent sort of ML work we've been doing has been really around OpenCV and using computer vision on a lot of the evidence that we receive. So a lot of the evidence we receive as it relates to passports from various countries, birth certificates, etc., all this stuff really comes in bulk. And sometimes it comes in bulk, essentially a big, huge PDF. So we've been doing a lot of experimentation with essentially parsing this information out, using OpenCV and some other algorithms and tools to essentially look at the geometry of where some of this text sits, and then looking at essentially using like Tesseract and things of that nature to start to pull that data out and do more of that validation as it relates to person centricity, but more importantly as it relates to adjudication. Instead of these folks thumbing through all of these pages of paper and whatever else, and then cross-referencing and swivel chairing between different systems, moving down this path and leveraging some of these tool sets provides that adjudicator a nice, clean interface of prepackaged data that they can then quickly review. And to some degree, what we're moving towards again is actually doing full pre-review or pre-adjudication based upon some of this work. And I think it's, when you talk about images, et cetera, it's been really interesting to see how, looking at various countries and sort of all the anti-counterfeiting, you think we're down at that level of detail trying to get rid of holograms so we can cleanly look and obtain all of that text data and match it up with the data that they might have entered in another format. And then it provides us an ability as well to really start to look at schemas across all of these different types of evidence that an individual would provide. And that then now provides us in a clean JSON format data that we can now really start to look at.
Yep, that's great. That's great. I'm going to move around a little bit here, and with a lot of new technologies over the last 40 years, machine learning and AI can be buzzy, and some of our non-tech leadership get really excited about it. They tend to think it's a catch-all and can solve everything. What are some of the challenges, Ira, that you're seeing? You're early on. What are some of the challenges you see in adopting ML and AI?
That's a really interesting question, because the answer is part of how we started to engage executives in understanding what AI and ML can really offer. But we have a responsibility to feed AI and ML information and data that we think is reliable. And that actually touches on what I mentioned early on. The pursuit of AI and ML has been transformative for OJP, and that it's really helped us to focus on ensuring that we manage data as a strategic asset. It's been a great lever for me, just in conversation with executives, to help them understand how we have to change our business processes, how we have to renovate our applications, our systems, so that we really are managing our data in ways that are useful to then enable the business to get to the next level. So I hope that answers your specific question,
Yeah,
and also gives me opportunity to speak to why I think OJP is in a good position to leverage AI and ML, and I'm really looking forward to getting to the point where we can start to prototype out some of the benefits that we're looking for.
Great, great. Ralph, you're in a research environment. What challenges do you see? What challenges still remain, frankly, for ML and AI in your environment?
Sure, that's a great question. So our story is a little bit different in that internally we haven't had a struggle adopting AI and machine learning, deep learning, because we're a research institution, and that's what we're supposed to be doing, is exploring the cutting edge and the state of the art. Our challenge has been, first of all, understanding what problems AI can really solve. It isn't a silver bullet, right? And so we're learning that trying to create a generalized catch-all type solution or a model that's going to do everything, that doesn't work. It's going to be moderate performance at best. You got to have specific use cases that you're going after, specific questions that you're trying to answer, and you're going to be much more successful, and the model is going to work better, or whatever approach you're taking. Then the next thing, as far as challenges would be concerned, are concerned, it's working with our sponsors or our government partners and convincing them that they can trust what they're putting before them. So one of the key challenges specifically with deep learning is it's sometimes hard to explain how it came to the results that it came to. Unlike traditional machine learning or statistics or other approaches where you can point to a specific algorithm and this is how this answer was derived, when you're working with deep learning and there's a model with thousands of layers deep, and even the data scientists can't really tell you why it came to the conclusion it came to. So then you have to speak specifically in terms of precision, right? And so we're not telling you yes or no, or this is this or that, but rather we have a confidence level that we think this could be what you're looking for. And so if you put garbage in front of your customers, or if your model produces garbage, they're not going to trust it. They already don't trust it. So if you're not putting things in front of them that work, they're not going to trust it all the more.
Yeah, very good. Zach, you come from a world, at least from a government perspective, that it's fair to say maybe takes a little more risk than other government organizations. What challenges do you have in your environment?
That's definitely true. I think we take certain liberties, right, that a lot of other big bureaucracies probably wouldn't do. But that said, right, like I think most of my public sector peers here could probably understand, is that there are still, anytime you try to do something new, there's always going to be the naysayers that seemingly come out of the woodwork. Like you said, I think it's definitely about sort of focusing on and actually embedding with a mission partner to actually solve a very discrete problem set. And then there's also, as you mentioned, the challenge with those that maybe don't quite understand it, but read all the articles and hype, are into the hype and the buzz. They have this tendency to maybe make it over bureaucratic, right? They want to stand up a task force or committee and get after the organization's hardest problem. And it's really about tempering their expectations a little bit, right? And again, solving really discrete problems that solve a very clear mission problem with partnership from that mission.
Yep. You know, I'll go to you, Rob. That kind of maybe feeds into my next question is, you know, we're all excited about ML and AI and all the emerging technology. So nobody has to convince us and most of the people in this room, but not everybody drinks that Kool-Aid. How do you overcome some of those challenges? How do you overcome the naysayers in your organization? What are your thoughts?
So I would say over the past couple of years, being at sort of working with other awesome teams and being at the front of this, without a good business use case that you can actually move forward with, good luck. I think you've already heard that already on this panel, but some of the approaches we've taken have been, again, sort of in an experimental, hypothesis-driven sort of environment, even to the point where we've actually had contracts that we've let to do this type of work, to illustrate some of the benefits, to help garner the business and illustrate the value. So having some of those targeted key partnerships with business, as well as just probably having a little bit of charisma and some marketing prowess definitely helps, at least in our environment. And then again, a lot of education. So bringing in the right folks, having in the, you know, which we've manifested or has manifested in, we do essentially tech talks on a weekly basis. We actually are bringing in, on the 27th, we're bringing in some Spark founders and Kafka founders. So we, you know, using those types of venues and having those types of personalities come in and invite the business and put them in the front row really does help us and get through that sort of naysayer. On the technical side, showing these advantages and then showing essentially that automated process matched up or married with essentially that manual process. And you know, here's the confidence level we get. What confidence level are you getting on the manual side? Going through that exercise has really proven to eradicate a lot of those naysayers.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Chris, what kind of support or lack of support did you get and for some of your initiatives, and what did you do about it?
So this is an interesting question for me because our model-based engineering initiative has a different set of naysayers. They have other nays, and we're actually hoping to use this technology as part of the argument for model-based engineering, that because we have this more structured data and more formal approach, that we're able to leverage these more sophisticated types of analysis. But I think we face the same challenges either way. I think from my experience, user acceptance, user experience is a key part of this. You can take something very sophisticated, and it can be very difficult sometimes to get users to accept it for unintuitive reasons. So I think we work a lot with user experience designers to make sure that what we're doing fits into what the user expects. And I think understanding how we're going to need to change it or modify it to respond to those little nits people have, or if they need to see something corrected, is going to be key to overcoming some of those challenges.
Okay, great, great. Ralph, I'm going to go back to you, which is I think we're coming to a place where some of these initiatives are starting to move from research to practice, right, in all of your organizations. And how do you incorporate what you've done into existing workflows? How do you get that message out? And how do you address, Chris kind of hit on it, how do you, those users, how do you address those issues of trust? We touched on it a little bit earlier. How do they trust that the inferences that's being made, that they can have confidence in that? How do you build that?
Good questions. So at the lab, we're an applied research lab, meaning things that we produce, eventually, hopefully, something actually works, and we can deploy it into sponsor space and support mission. So there's a big gap between, we call it the valley of death, between research and something that becomes operational. There's a lot of things that researchers will work on, papers will be written and whatnot, but in the end, they don't necessarily always turn into something that's operational, right? So you have that part of it is how do we take what a researcher's created, how do we make it now scalable, How do we harden it? How do we deploy this into an operational environment, right? And then as far as working it into the workflow is concerned, that's just, for us at least, that's working with our customers around specific use cases and helping them understand how this particular piece of technology is going to help them. And the trust comes over time, right? And by them seeing how it's going to make their life easier. So this could be anything from we have ground truth, right? We have golden data sets, if you will, that we can measure things like recall and precision and F values and things like that. I'm not a data scientist, and all the way to the the other end where there's just that test of an analyst that it doesn't care what it doesn't matter what the stats say. If an analyst looks at it and they're like, that's not right, then that's really your ultimate test, right? And so, so it's kind of it's a bit of a process to fill that gap.
I think I heard you say alley of death.
Yes.
Did you say that? Okay. sounds scary.
Because you
I
just
think
don't know how long it's going to take
it's
to get
accurate,
through it, right?
Yeah,
So.
it's accurate, right? Like that in between time is really, really accurate.
Yeah.
Ira, what about in your organization? You're heading down this path and starting to think about how to make these things operational in your environment. What do you see in terms of going from getting started to actual implementing AI and ML in practice?
It's frankly, it's still a little mysterious to us. We've engaged external parties, data scientists who are expert in using the tools to help us prepare the data, help us model our initial endeavors into AI and ML. We're now looking at where we think management by exception can give us greatest benefit. We're looking at the sources of information that we think we need to incorporate into our models that we're not looking at now that can help us really understand where we can be more impactful in our work. We have pretty good buy-in within the organization, which I think is really good. We spent a lot of time bringing what we called our data tour around to all of the offices and other stakeholder organizations that we serve to speak to our vision for how we're going to use AI and ML, and very importantly speak to the importance of managing data as a strategic asset. Part of the way we got alignment there was by drawing correlations between many of our business operations and those that are really kind of commodity operations in other industries, other businesses, potentially also other grant-making organizations within the federal government. And that helped us to identify where we think I'm not going to call them really low-hanging fruit, but where the best bang for buck is and lowest risk for our initial use cases. I do expect that for some period of time we're going to have human beings auditing whatever the results or recommendations are out of the engines. And I expect, frankly, it's going to take a number of years before we really start expecting that we will be living in a world of management by exception and just reviewing models, adjusting parameters, coming up with better recommendations, and trusting that the model itself is actually a pretty accurate representation of our business and our mission.
Great. Zach, I'll go to you. How do you deal with issues of trust? I mean, your world is one where those operators have to trust what you're doing. There's a lot on the line. How have you navigated that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a number of issues that sort of gets in the way of integrating AI and ML into a mission workflow. Actually, a lot of our effort is spent just like finding data in shadow IT and getting it off of shared drives all over the world. But in terms of actually building trust with the users, I found it sort of helps to have or identify those like Goldilocks problems, right? They're not so risky that the organization's unwilling to try. They're somewhat tangible or achievable in a relatively like near term or time frame. And then finally, like the solving them in this iterative process actually does provide value back to the organization, right? And it's just having the users, oftentimes directly with the developers and data scientists in the process, really sort of just comes with time and iterations. And it's 100% about user acceptance and getting them bought in early.
Yep. Rob, how are you incorporating when you go from research to practice? How are you incorporating those into the workflows and dealing with the issues of employee awareness?
Again, it's targeted. It's some specific use cases, and hopefully the cone continues to increase as it relates to adoption and operationalization of the tool sets. I think also taking an approach of not just being data scientists that have access to all this data, but really opening up all of the data and like data as a service and providing the right tool sets and education to the point where we're trying to look at sort of citizen developers, where we can, again, if we are sharing all of this data out with complete transparency, then why not open it up to not just data scientists or the specific folks working on quality? We should open it up to all within the USCIS environment. And so finding the right tool sets that will enable that so they can just take advantage of it themselves with some proper governance and standards.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, JPL has long cycle missions and operations, and so it's fair to say that introducing change in those cycles is probably not the best practice. But how is AI and ML and how is digital transformation? How's it changing NASA, JPL? How's it modernizing your agency?
Well, that's definitely a big question. And you're right, we do have long cycle missions. And I think the way JPL missions kind of work is each mission offers a new opportunity to try new things. So each mission it probably looks similar to the public, but with how we engineer it can be very different. And I can't really speak to our entire digital transformation strategy. That's quite a large endeavor at the lab. But in the area we're involved in, this shift towards model-based engineering is a key piece of it, where so much can now be done with software in engineering. And for those who aren't engineers, probably thought engineers were always software weenies, but it's a more specialized kind of software use than just the traditional Excel and things like that. So it's become much more sophisticated. And missions have to deal with a lot more complexity in the information they're able to generate themselves as part of that engineering process. So as new missions come in, I think the challenge for us is really to find a way to leverage this to make all these engineering products not only discoverable, but also to be able to analyze them for consistency and correspondence. Is the mass of this component in this engineering model, is it the same component as the one in this engineering model? Is it the same value? Is it different? How do we check things? Is this system able to power on when it's not supposed to? There's all sorts of these kinds of activities that, from my view, are now possible. Engineers always want to know the answer to these questions, but oftentimes we end up just thinking about it a lot to make sure that it's not going to happen. And with this massively prevalent ability to do computing, engineering modeling, and apply these very sophisticated techniques to find new answers to these things at a commodity level, so that it's not like a research endeavor. I think that's the opportunity as new missions come up to take advantage of that stuff and get more out of the missions that we design.
Are there any tools missing from your toolbox on this kind of journey?
I mean, I think it's more just how the tools are going to evolve. So from a toolbox standpoint, I think being able to offer these kind of tools to engineers is a big breakthrough. Traditionally, for a long time, I think AI, ML, neural networks and stuff they were difficult to put into a mainstream engineering workflow. So making them commodity level tools will be a big breakthrough. But the forefront of engineering tool development is rampant. Partially because there's so much more you can do computationally now, and partially because I think today's engineer expects to be working in an integrated engineering environment, not emailing you such and such data and calling somebody about some parameter. They want to go in and see everything together. And that's really what the model-based engineering environment is about. I think in people's imaginations, it's, Iron Man 3 with the hologram, and he's just like, okay, manufacturer. So That's really unlikely, but and most engineers probably wouldn't accept it either. Engineers want to see big tables of numbers and know that they're all connected to the right thing. You know, if I'm testing something in the test bed, is the number I'm testing with, did that really come from the propulsion guy? Is that really his number? You know, is that really his parameter? Having that confidence that all those things are together, and using technologies like this to check models, you know, and the trust thing, like you brought up, like being able, I think somebody talked about constantly checking and auditing things. Engineers just love to do that. So it's got to be able to withstand that kind of scrutiny and deliver the real precise result. So I think that's really the challenge for our transformation, is to get into that environment.
Yeah, that's great. Great insight about the kind of the commoditization of these tools over time. Rob, what about at USCIS? How is AI and ML accelerating digital transformation and IT modernization? Is it happening? Do you see that?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, it's we're seeing it in almost all of our contracts as they come out. You know, this afternoon we're having an industry day where a big portion of industry day will be talking about what you know, how AI and ML is affecting all of essentially OIT at USCIS. So it's definitely a first-class citizen, and it's definitely forefront, to the point where I think the message, part of the message we're trying to deliver is actively engaging with industry for them to help us understand where it fits in across, you know, anything from automated testing and pipelines to how do we bake this into all of our software delivery. So ML is just another dependency that we can essentially pull from like a Nexus repo, and then associate with the right tooling and the right horsepower to get that job done. So without it, I think we're at that level of wanting to incorporate the right tooling, the right and the right skill sets and folks into all of USCIS's delivery.
Yep. Ira, what about at OJP? I mean, you're still early on your journey, but how do you see AI and ML starting the transformation journey and the IT modernization journey for you?
It's already had its effect in that it's an aspirational goal for us. So as I've mentioned, it's really helped us to align our thinking around how we want to use AI, ML, and consequently how we have to rethink how we run our business so that we'd be able to leverage it. So when I think about the modernization that it's brought, it is not in fact the application currently, but it is the aspiration. You can imagine we have legacy systems that go back decades. We have systems that were very good at collecting free text, and in that free text we have information, and that information typically has been transcribed, sometimes correctly, sometimes incorrectly, frequently incorrectly, by human beings as we've needed to undertake analyses of the awards we've already made, the impacts that we've had through our awards. You mentioned that you're using tools to do text extraction or model extraction out of texts. We have used some of that, so we have experimented with that. It's actually been useful in a couple of point use cases for us. So we know it works. It was great to be able to demonstrate that. And what the side benefit was that after we had that information, we could begin to model in new ways using some standard analytical tools and simply using those relatively small use cases of applying AI and ML. We're able to demonstrate that we get some immediate benefit. So as I say, buy-in has not been a particular problem. It's been getting the commitment, the long duration commitment that's going to be required to really put us in a position to succeed with AI ML. Okay. I'll say again, I feel very confident in the roadmap that we've laid out, and I would love to have the opportunity 2 years from now to be back on a panel like this and speak about what the journey's been like between now and then.
Great. Ralph, switching gears a little bit, we talked about data scientists, but many agencies I talk to, many enterprises I talk to, really, this is across the board. One of the reasons they cite for having trouble getting started or having a vision is just lack of data scientists and lack of the kind of pipeline that they believe they need to get started. What have you done, what has your agency done to get the people and the process and the technology align to get started on AI and ML?
Sure. That's a great question, specifically around staffing and getting the right people. Getting talented people is hard. There's no doubt about it. Because we're already a research institution, we've had a lot of the people that have spearheaded our machine learning and deep learning efforts. We're already there, right? At the forefront, helping to push the envelope on what we can do in these particular areas. So grateful for that. We had that benefit, and then we tend to attract people as well. So we do have data scientists there, right? And but it is always hard to attract good talent, especially kind of in this government space where you're competing with industry, and it's a field that's in high demand. And so you're going after those folks that are not only really smart, but believe in the mission as well, right? And so that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is then that retraining of internal staff that you already have, people that have interest, right? And because all of us started, somewhere, and so taking the folks that are already interested in pursuing these types of opportunities and giving them the opportunities to grow in their career.
Yeah, great. Zach, Ralph hit on a couple of things: training, some kind of internal resources. What are you guys doing to kind of around the people, process, and technology to accelerate?
Yep. So I'll say that, some of the out-of-the-box AI ML services that AWS provides, recognition, comprehend, they've really lowered the barrier to entry, right? Like, you don't really need data scientists to start using some of those tools, and just proving out concepts, confirming or validating that AI can actually help solve a problem that you have. And so I've heard our partners say things like that, and I think it's a bit of a scapegoat, right? Like, you can use computer scientists, your current system developers, to start testing and prototyping. And then, yeah, of course, you're gonna hit a point where those out-of-the-box services don't satisfy all your requirements, and you'll have to start getting into training and building new models. Again, it's maybe a little bit unfair, but given our position, we'll beg, borrow, and steal that skill set from all over the government and industry. So it's a challenge. A lot of the work, though, I think that goes unnoticed is probably that back-end stuff, right? Like, we still have this challenge that really keeps us from scaling and fully automating in the realm of like the data engineering side, right? How do we get the data out of these different shadow IT environments and feeding these AI systems? It's really the challenge I'm facing.
People have data under their desks and the old IBM S32s or whatever. Rob, I'll start with you. We're going to do one last question, I think, as we come to the close here, which is, what advice do you have for the audience in assessing where they are with AI and ML, and picking the right problems, the right use cases to solve? Where do they get? What's your advice on getting started?
I'll go back to making sure you've got a good business partnership. They really should be your stewards and should help drive, again, any requirements. Without that proper buy-in, I wish you the best of luck. It becomes an R&D facet that you can shelve sometime. Yeah. So again, just back to good business partnership and value is critical. And then again, we've talked about skills here. Having the right skill sets, the right tools, and making sure you've got a good baseline of what that really means to back up some of those use cases can really be helpful. And that can be through contracts, it can be through some very creative hiring, especially in the government space. It's quite difficult. And I think understanding the data itself, back to what Zach was just saying, the data engineering piece is a big focus from where we are with all the legacy systems moving off of mainframes. We still have a lot of data cleanup to do. So having that skill set in place, I think, and understanding what your data sanity level is pretty important.
Yeah, I like that term, data sanity. Right. Chris, what's your feedback for the audience?
Well, I come from a background in systems engineering, and at some level, new technology like this, when you're approaching a problem like this, I think you don't want to get distracted with religious excitement or fanboyism. I think picking the things you want to accomplish, being clear about the requirements and the use cases, what the success criteria looks like. What are you really going to use this to do to improve what you're doing in engineering or whatever your business unit is, I think is key. And making sure that you understand the alternatives, looking at the traditional way things get done versus how the new technology is going to impact it. I think a risk or a challenge with exotic new things like model-based engineering or AI or ML or any of these things is getting distracted with how cool it is and losing track of what problem it can actually solve, and ending up in a situation where you've solved a very trivial problem in a very complex way is not going to help you advance your cause either. I think the real challenge is these things are definitely powerful, definitely capable. How do you bring them to bear in the right place to get the win, so to speak, to solve the problem? So,
yeah, really cool. Ira, you've described some really cool stuff in kind of changing the delivery and the outcomes of your agency. What advice do you have on picking the right problems when you're getting started?
I think the biggest problem is cultural. So that's the right problem to get started with. And in my experience, you have to kind of work both sides in the middle at the same time, or both ends in the middle. So for those who don't see the opportunity, is inspire potentially by finding corollaries in other industries and representing use cases, press releases, whatever it may be, or bringing in scientists, data scientists, to talk about their experience in related areas, to help those who don't see the vision to understand that AI and ML can have an impact on our organization. On the other end, those who are very enthusiastic and kind of chasing after the new shiny thing, it's actually, I find, very important to moderate their access, their influence, their expression of how the technologies and techniques may impact the business, because they could, in fact, not be directed toward the actual mission of the organization, but instead some specific use case or, frankly, a personal interest. And then in the middle is really governing and controlling the narrative around what is the opportunity to the organization, and then what do we have to do to reach that objective, versus allowing, as I say, the naysayers to have their platform and those who have a personal, if keen, interest to control the perception of what the tool may or may not be.
Those are great thoughts. Ralph, in your environment, you have admittedly maybe some different challenges. You've got physicists, you've got chemists, you've got all sorts of scientists and researchers. It would seem easy to adopt new technology, but that's probably not the case sometimes. What advice do you have? What feedback do you have on getting started?
Sure. I think the advice I have is just do it. Pick a use case and get your feet wet and do it. You know, so much of what we do, I've talked a little bit about the research, but just as important is the engineering. And there is so much that can be done from the engineering side. And really, when it comes down to creating a scalable, deployable solution for our sponsors that helps them with their mission, it really comes down, you know, taking that research and applying it and having the engineering behind it, right, and the proper to scale that out. So there is a lot. The bar has been lowered. Somebody mentioned that, and it can sound intimidating, you know. And you go to some of these websites and you're doing some reading, and there's math you haven't seen since college, and you're like, I have no idea where you're going to get started with this, right? But it doesn't have to be that way. There is a lot of low-hanging fruit, a lot of things, technologies you can explore, and honestly, I mean, AWS, from that perspective, that's really helped us from the applied side, because we're able to scale out our solutions very quickly, and that's been great.
Awesome. Oh. Zach, we'll give you the last word. What?
In 10 seconds or less. Yeah, Ralph's on point.
Yeah.
It's all about, as leaders, right, empowering the people who are willing to take risks, try new things, and just sort of changing the culture of the organization to just do it.
Yep. Awesome. Well done. Thank you very much. We're at time. Thanks, everyone. This was a pretty amazing set of panelists, and I think you all do want us back. I heard Ira say he's definitely coming back to tell us about all the success. 2 years. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much.